we were reading a lot of the leftist literature on grassroots organizing, cadre building, how to take over a town hall meeting, all of that stuff. And
is Saul Alinsky part of that?
Like Saul Alinsky's part of it, but there's a whole literature that thinks a lot about how to essentially manipulate public opinion. And if you read Saul Alinsky, it's horribly cynical because it's like, and he actually dedicates his book to Lucifer, as you might recall.
I've only
unironically,
I've only read bits and pieces of Alinsky. I need to actually read the whole thing.
But as Saul Alinsky, the Rules for Radicals is really a series of tactics designed to get people to think something that they wouldn't naturally think. And
great.
And we so very cynical, very manipulative. But there's a certain truth in that that politicians and political actors and even voters, like, they never ever have perfect knowledge. Humans never have perfect knowledge. And it's not a flaw. You're not a low information voter. You just, you're living your life, and it's almost rational not to pay attention at all. So the question was, how would we actually organize people around liberty and limited government and fiscal responsibility and, very radical concepts, right?
Right.
And maybe we should balance the budget. I don't know. A monstrous idea.
Don't drive the ship of state.
Yeah.
Off of a cliff, to mix metaphors.
Yeah. So fast forward to FreedomWorks was the organization that I founded. But again, like, based on this literature of grassroots organizing, could we create a constituency of people that would show up and advocate for liberty? And showing up means going to a town hall meeting. It might mean visiting your congressman. Back then it meant writing letters. We don't do that anymore.
Right.
But just this idea, like,
being engaged civically.
Yeah. And I had worked on the Hill by then. I was chief of staff for a congressman. And one thing I noticed, which won't shock anybody, is that when people came to D.C. to see their congressman, no one ever came and said, "Thank you for doing less. Would you please not spend money on me?"
Yeah.
No one does that. Like, it's all interest groups. It's all people that want something. Their hands are out. And it's very difficult for a member of Congress to say no. They want to be popular. They want to be happy. And, our idea was, could we actually support legislation and legislators who were doing the right thing, trying to do the right thing, but also, like, let them know when they were doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, hold them accountable.
Yeah, based on that leftist literature. We were doing that long before there was a Tea Party movement, but we were actually studying the Tea Party as a model for mostly peaceful social change.
Now, when you say you were studying the Tea Party, are you talking about the 2010 post?
No, the OG one.
Oh, the Boston Tea Party.
The Sam Adams, because this is before 2010.
Right.
And I'm obviously fascinated with American history and the miracle of the founding and where these ideas came from. A lot of people think it was sort of this immaculate conception of these very wise men who had read the right books, suddenly said, let's do the liberty thing. But it was an ethos. The spirit of 76 was very much a grassroots movement. And a key moment in the galvanization of colonial opinion was the Boston Tea Party. And Sam Adams organized that, and it very explicitly was not violent. We're not going on those ships to kill everybody, which was a kind of a radically different approach at the time,
right?
Particularly after what the British had been doing to the colonists. So they trained, they organized. I mean, they obviously hid their faces so that they wouldn't be hung for treason, but it was a nonviolent protest. And between that and the British massacre, you had a shift in colonial opinion. I think it was John Adams that, I'm going to butcher the quote, but he famously said, at the time we were doing this, one third of the country was pro-liberty, patriots. 1/3 of the country was in the tank with the British. And then there was a third of the country that, where am I? What do I think?
Yeah.
And it was their job to move opinion in their direction. So in a lot of ways, this was the model that we were working on at FreedomWorks. And suddenly this thing called social media came along. And we were very lonely in opposing the Wall Street bailout in 2008. You know, I thought it was just like, we're going to fight this. Not only are we going to lose, but nobody's going to be with us.
Well, and to go back to that for a minute, because that is the birth of my political awakening, is the financial crisis.
Yeah.
And it was this sense of, I was always a political kid, and a like conservative kid. And I had sort of set that aside. I was working in television, but when the financial crisis hit in 2008, I was now a young dad. I had a mortgage. I had an awareness about that interest rates matter. I had this sense of observing the fact that my own apartment in Hoboken had gone up in value a bunch in a short amount of time. And it was like, the population of the New York City area hasn't changed radically in the past 12 months. So what's going on here? So there was a tangible thing taking place at that moment where I think people felt the way things were breaking. And it was crazy. And it was crazy to see the response to be like, no, we should give all the money we possibly can to the guys the politicians that set this up to fail, like Barney Frank, and the banks that mismanaged themselves into oblivion. We should bail out the losers. This is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it was a galvanizing moment. And I remember there was a lot of overlap between early, Ron Pauler's early Tea Partiers, Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the students at Occupy, before it got hijacked by the professionals, they're like, where's my bailout? I got all these student loans. I can't afford to rent my apartment. And I'm looking at these big banks and I'm like, where's my bailout? And it's a reasonable question to ask.
Yeah.
But it was not just a galvanizing moment in the sense that it was so outrageous, so obviously outrageous, such a transfer of power and money from have-nots to haves. But it also happened at this moment where social media was a thing, finally. And it was a practical thing, like people could actually use it without having a degree in coding or something. And so we're opposing the Wall Street bailout. Kind of like a sacrificial lamb. Let's do this because we have to, but there's no way we're going to stop this. And we're sending out all these missives on very primitive social media. And there was such a wave of people. I'm like, what's happening? It used to be hard to get people to show up. It used to be like this physical activity. Like you have to convince someone to get on a bus and come to Washington, D.C. to do something. That's it's almost irrational. It's such an investment of time and energy. And suddenly there was this wave of anger and calls that actually shut down Capitol Hill. I'm like, okay, that's a paradigm shift. There's something different going on. I said, I have this idea. I'm going to organize 10,000 people on the Capitol Mall. I know this sounds crazy. Our side's never done this before, but let's see what happens. Fast forward to that day. We planned for 10,000 and we easily got over 1 million. And we had no idea. The park police had no idea. All of the professionals that are responsible for making sure that big gatherings don't get out of hand, nobody had any idea because the organizers were not us at all. It was people that said, hey, there's this thing and I'm excited about this thing. You know, Glenn Beck was talking about it at the time, and we were talking about it, and we were putting out all of these posts, and apparently they were being shared, but you couldn't really track it that way then. But people were self-organizing buses all over the country. One guy would put down the deposit, and he'd put out a post to his friends and say, hey, $25, we're going to Washington. And that spontaneously produced this massive group of people. It wasn't financed like, the hit on the Tea Party was financed by the Kochs.
Yeah, it's a
corporations,
AstroTurf,
Republican Party, AstroTurf. No, it was almost like a market, right? Spontaneously self-organizing, people coming together, all galvanized by the Wall Street bailout. It wasn't Obama. It was not Obama. That was the other argument. Like,
it's all a bunch of racists that hate the new black president.
As Bill Maher would always tell me, you're just angry because there's a black man in the White House. Very lazy. I wonder if he still appreciates the irony of him being foisted on his own petard. I don't know. But like you could wade through the audience and I did this, and I documented some of this in my first book. Like, why are you here? Almost to a person, they would quote George W. Bush saying, "We have to abandon the free market to save it." I'm like, how did you guys even hear him say that? It's because this insider game had suddenly become radically democratized. And they knew what the Wall Street bailout was, and they stopped the first House vote. And then Boehner and Pelosi sort of colluded to do it around their backs, and eventually they went to the Treasury Department and did it anyway.
That's right. It's easy to forget that at the time in the fall of 2008, the first bill to bail out the banks failed in the House.
Yeah.
Because congressmen were getting the calls.
Wild wave. And gosh, who's the guy that named it the Tea Party? Like,
was it Rick Santelli?
Yeah, Rick Santelli's like, let's have a Tea Party.
Yeah.
And it became a great brand. And, you know, perhaps a lot of the activists that embraced that brand, I mean, they sort of knew what the Tea Party was, but they didn't appreciate that they were actually embracing an entire model of social change founded in sort of the American ethos of 76. So it was a beautiful thing. The others, once you asked them why they were there, you would ask them what they want. And again, like, no talking points, no scripts, but to a person, they would say individual freedom, some version of this, individual freedom, constitutionally limited government, and fiscal responsibility. Super radical, dangerous ideas, right?
Right.
And of course,
basically Reagan republicanism.
Yeah.
But more fundamental.
Yeah. And it, you know, a lot of that was seeded by the Ron Paul revolution. I mean, there was a lot of that had fed into this. And by the way, the Tea Party wasn't the first social movement that sort of started to scare the machine, the establishment. Part of it was you could go back to Howard Dean, but you could certainly look at the Ron Paul movement as no one expected that to happen. But he used the cultural soapbox, a presidential campaign, to plant seeds like Ludwig von Mises. Who's this guy?
Well, that was actually, in a sense, when I say that the financial crisis was the thing, there was actually two predecessors to that. One was reading John Stossel's book, Give Me a Break, on the bus on my way into the city every day. And being like, oh, wait, maybe I'm a libertarian. This is making a lot of sense.
Yes.
And then the other was Ron Paul. And specifically, there was a moment in the presidential debates where, I mean, this was fairly radical. Ron Paul was talking about how 9/11 was a version of blowback for the CIA messing around, and for American interventionism overseas. And Rudy Giuliani was like, "How dare you? You know, take that back." Because he was, you know, America's mayor. And I mean, I was in New York for 9/11. So, you know, I wasn't necessarily predisposed to like what Ron Paul was saying at that time. It was a little shocking.
If you go back and watch that clip, Ron Paul gets booed wildly because the GOP, the part of the duopoly, had filled the room with their guys, like GOP donors, and they were like as offended as Rudy Giuliani was. But outside that room, the exact opposite happened.
Right.
And this again is early on, but you know, and he used a old school tactic to get into a presidential primary debate and to be on TV. But it was social media that propelled the Ron Paul movement. It would have died on the vine because they would have choked him off. They would have said, okay, we're going to come up with a rule that doesn't let you come on and do these debates because we're not having that kind of subversive talk. This is our party. So you had all these things happening.
Yeah.
And you know, we can fast forward today, and I'm still optimistic that someday, despite the absurdity of our political choices apparently that we'll have, you have all of these insurgents. And not just third parties, but you have, you know, the Ron Pauls in the Republican Party. You have the Tulsi Gabbards in the Democratic Party. They did the same thing to her.
Yeah.
The Democrats did the same thing to her that the Republicans did to Ron Paul. And so you have these minority voices, these dissident voices that are very much empowered by technology. And you know, the Tea Party just wouldn't have happened without that technology. And the the machine, the people that started demonizing them, it all started that day. You put 1 million people on the mall, and everybody's like, oh, what is this? We better do something about this. So they started trying to figure out who to take out.
And who's they? When you say they, who are you referring to? That's a shorthand.
Some of my friends call it the blob. I call it the machine, but it's the ecosystem of power mongers that feed off of big government. And obviously senators and congressmen, the lobby class, the corporate class, we now call it the deep state, but like the administrative state is a real thing.
Yeah.
There's
is there like 1 million non-military executive branch employees, all of whom have a stake in this in their budget growing?
There's a reason why Arlington County is one of the wealthiest counties in the world.
It is literally like the Hunger Games. Yeah, that's right. The counties surrounding Washington, D.C. are the richest counties in America.
Yeah.
How that isn't enough to generate pitchforks is beyond me. It's Pan Am.
Yeah. I mean, if we ever do build a wall, they're going to build a wall around themselves.
To keep the rest of us out.
And they'll probably develop sort of a Hunger Games sort of motif because it's kind of cool. But it at first, and it shifted precipitously, but at first it was the Democratic machine trying to stop us. Because at this point, you're seeing like real political potential in all of these people because they've started organizing in districts. Again, spontaneously. Nobody did this. You can't actually tell someone to knock on doors. It's something that they actually have to want to do. And if you actually want to have a tremendous impact, it needs to be decentralized. You have to rely on local knowledge. You have to rely on people that know where to go and what to do. All of these people that think you can engineer this from the top down and really have an impact, you need a lot of money to do that. And as I've pointed out, we had no money. But the Democrats, so you have Democratic senators, you have Obama very publicly demonizing us. Organizing for Obama actually called us domestic terrorists.
It sounds familiar.
All of these.
Now they just call parents domestic terrorists.
Right. All of these themes were. I'm sure we weren't the first, but racist, domestic terrorist, Nazis, and we're called not like Nancy Pelosi has called us Nazis because someone had taken a picture of Barack Obama and put the little mustache on it. I'm like, maybe you think that's tasteless, but that doesn't make us Nazis. Right. I didn't get it, but they're
it's
grabbing.
Like you're criticizing Nazism, and maybe you're being outrageous, but you're not saying you like. It's like, does that mean they're a fan of both the Nazis and Obama? I'm lost.
Yeah. So it started with the Democrats being panicked, and there was at the time they were the smart people were predicting pretty much a status quo election. Republicans weren't going to win the House. They certainly weren't going to win the Senate.
And you're talking at this point about the 2010 midterms,
yeah, this is 2010. Obama has been elected, and the Republicans, with a very pathetic showing by John McCain, sort of got their butts handed to them.
It's hard to imagine with George W. Bush, the president, against the backdrop of a 1929 style collapse, that any Republican, like Jesus Christ, could come down from heaven and be like, I'm a Republican, and would have probably lost in 2008.
But the thing that shifted, the Democrats were scared to death, but we weren't really interested in the Democrats. We had a slogan at the time, which was, you have to beat the Republicans before you can beat the Democrats. We had T-shirts. They were very popular, unless you happen to be an incumbent Republican. And they didn't like him that much at all. But, Mike Lee was the tip of the spear. We were the first to endorse him. Nobody took that campaign seriously. The party didn't take it seriously. Constitutional lawyer, was riding around in a bus in Utah. Yeah. That's not going to happen. And then it happened.
And then Thomas Massey is another amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not big on politicians in general, but there's a handful. Thomas Massey's in that category. I'm like, no, this is like a good person with actual principles and sticks to them.
Tea Party wave, Justin Amash. And people forget this too, but Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell did everything he could to stop Rand Paul from getting the Republican nomination in Kentucky.
Yes.
And he handpicked his guy, and Rand crushed him. And so at this point, we're starting to piss off some really powerful people in the Republican Party. So I think that our real enemies were the machine in the Republican Party. And I was thinking about the legacy of not just Freedom Works, but the Tea Party movement. And we didn't know we were doing this at the time, but we just wanted to balance the budget. Again, super radical, too much debt. Stop it. Give us a little bit of our freedom back. But part of that would be doing something about never-ending wars. You can't actually balance the budget if you're fully funding the war on terror. That's a black hole. You will never fully fund that if you keep starting all of these wars, if you never get out of Afghanistan, if you never get out of Iraq. That's a money pit that destroys empire, to harken back to Ron Paul's point on that. So when we put out our Tea Party budget, we put defense on the table. And we actually used Ron Paul's numbers, because if you actually wanted to balance the budget, you had to do some substantial things. Mike Lee took out an old Republican lion, pro-defense, pro-never-ending war. We tried to take on Orrin Hatch.
Oh, yeah.
Pro-defense, pro-never-ending war. We went after Lindsey Graham. So we're trying, we were just trying to replace them with fiscally responsible, liberty-loving people, but we were actually taking on the war machine. And I didn't think about it that way. But man, we pissed off some important people. So it was fun. But the ultimate demise of the Tea Party around 13, 14, 15 was when Republicans, including some of the guys we helped get elected, broke the caps on spending. Remember, there were spending caps that the Tea Party forced.
Yeah, it was called the sequester, if I remember.
Yeah. Yes. And no one thought we'd pull that off, but we created enough pressure to do that. It was Republicans that broke the caps because the defense, they weren't even cuts. There were limits on the growth of spending. It was intolerable to them. So that's your Achilles heel. If you're a fiscal conservative and you don't care about these endless wars, you're never going to get there. And there are very few Republicans, you named many of them who are still there, who actually believe in fiscal responsibility. Thomas Massey gets a lot of crap for opposing foreign aid across the board. Mm-hmm. He gets accused of all sorts of horrible things because he's not wanting to spend money we don't have to send to other countries so that people can die in wars. It doesn't seem radical to me, his position, but in Washington, D.C., the machine, the people that went after the Tea Party, that's kryptonite, right? That guy's got to go.
If you like this clip, you should check out the full video and all the other great content we've got at Dad Saves America. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss our new stuff as it drops each week.